Very good. Now I see it right there. Bill W. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to change up the order a little bit today. We're going to start with emerging COVID-19 related egg issues, which would deal with pork. But what we're going to do is we're going to switch a little bit and go over to House File 2542, Senator Weber's bill. And Senator Weber, if you're ready, why don't we do that? I'll call you to the what, testifiers table?
Evidently, something like that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, what this bill, it's a House bill that, quite frankly, responds to the problem that we're having with some of the inspections and timelines that are needed for the bonding monies that, quite frankly, are not able to be met right now. So basically, this extends the deadline out, was that to December? Isn't that correct, Joel?
I believe that is correct. And Greg Knopf, you can also speak to that as well.
Yeah. And so, Greg, are you on?
Just 180 days, if not mistaken.
Myself. Yes, I am on. And you will need to move that the A1 amendment, though, to put it in the shape.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me. Yes.
The A1 amendment, it does instead of the 180 days to issue, they have until December 1st this year, only for this year.
Right. And so I would move that amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Senator Weber moves the A1 amendment. Do you want to run through the amendment, Senator Weber?
Wait a minute, Mr. Knopf, would you like to do that?
I can do that. Just a second here. Yeah, the amendment says, because notwithstanding 474 8.061 subdivision 2A, which is a restriction that they have to issue the bonds within 180 days of the allocation. And what this does is apparently there are a number of people who are not going to be able to because they can't even get people from HUD out. And so that there are a number of things that they have to go through to issue. So what this would do is just in the year 2020, they'll have until December 1st to issue the obligations, and they won't fall back to another pool if they don't issue them. So that's the bill, or the amendment, I should say.
Okay. Any questions from members? Okay. With that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, no. Gavel has been tapped. Motion prevails. Senator Weber, let's continue with the bill.
Okay, well, basically, the amendment is the bill at this point, and so I would just urge adoption of the bill.
And I believe we have some testifiers, Senator Johnson.
Okay. Would Ms. Mavity please begin your testimony?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Well, thank you, Chairman and committee members. My name is Ann Mavity, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Housing Partnership. And 2 years ago, April, I testified before this committee requesting the change that in the tax and bond program that which was adopted. And today I'm speaking in favor of the proposal, which would extend this 180-day deadline on the issuance of tax-exempt bonds to December of 2020. So without such a change, these bonds, most of which were issued on January 12th, they would expire on July 12th. So you know that these tax-exempt bonds are a critical resource across the state, and they're typically used in conjunction with 4% low-income housing tax credits to produce affordable housing. So back in 2017 and 2018, three of us in our organizations, myself on behalf of the Minnesota Housing Partnership, Warren Hansen with the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, and Ellen Solly with the Family Housing Fund, we convened a 15-member steering team from multifamily, for-profit and nonprofit developers, single family. The state of Minnesota was there, sub-allocators, cities were there, to look at how do we better fund and facilitate affordable housing through this program. You all told us to get on some agreements, and we brought back a consensus bill, if you recall, that had 5 critical points of agreement. And they were adopted last year. Thank you to all of you. And that included this 180-day issuance guidance. So the goal was to ensure that the bonds weren't being parked on projects for up to 3 years if the projects weren't really ready to move forward. And that's happening at a time last year, particularly when bonds were becoming a scarce resource. So they were oversubscribed, and many other projects that were ready to move forward were delayed because of lack of access to any of this funding. Of course, when that was proposed and when you adopted this, no one envisioned that we would be in this particular economic environment. So right now, there are 6 projects that represent 1,267 units of affordable housing and representing about $90 million in volume cap with tax-exempt bond allocation. So 4 of those projects are preservation. So it means that those bond funds are working directly to improve existing affordability for current residents and then extending that affordability out into the future. So all of the projects are desperately trying to close on their bonds within this 180-day limit, and some of them might, but they're at risk of losing them because of delays that they really can't control. HUD appraisals that aren't happening, or slow or canceled HUD inspections, the IRS required public hearings on these tax-exempt financing, and more. So in addition to losing the projects, we've added these new tax-exempt bond deposit requirements, which are refundable because we wanted to make sure the projects were ready to go, but those would be lost outright. So it makes a simple reapplication for those bonds, especially for the nonprofit providers, a real financial burden, and it would likely mean that some of those projects would never move forward. So on behalf of all 3 of those organizations that originally convened the work on this proposal, we're asking for this really simple change in the deadline for issuing bonds reflecting this economic environment. It's simple, targeted, critical change, and it will ensure more than 1,200 units of affordable housing are available for the Minnesotans who need it. So thanks for your leadership and your attention on this issue, and I'm certainly available for questions.
Any questions from members? Don't see any hands raised. This is kind of not necessarily regarding the bill, but just wondering on the federal tax credit side of things, Ms. Mavity, how is the market looking right now?
So what we're hearing is that the pricing hasn't dropped quite as much as I think folks have been fearing, but until we get to close, we won't know that. There certainly are additional risks, and there's another entire effort at the federal level that we are involved in and others locally to make sure that the requirements that the federal low-income housing tax credit program has on many of these projects, that those are also getting relief from some of their compliance deadlines to make sure that that's reflective also of this environment. So that's a parallel challenge that we're working on, but none of those are all on the back end of the projects. This one is really on the front end.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Well, if there is nothing else, Senator Weber, any final comments regarding the bill as amended?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This is Greg, Mr. Knopf. You know, based on the discussion that was just occurring, I'm thinking that we need an effective date on this, the day following final enactment. Okay. So you can just adopt that orally, and I will get the amendment to Caitlin to include in the committee report. But I think it should just say effective date. This section is effective the day following final enactment, just to make sure it's in place before some of those terms expire, before the 180 days expires.
Okay. If the author is agreeable to that, Senator Weber. Senator Weber, can you hear me? I think you're
sorry about that. Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Would you like to make the motion?
So moved.
All right. Senator Weber has made the motion to adopt the oral amendment by Greg All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes, so we'll include that. Senator Weber, to your bill as amended and re-amended.
Thank you. I guess if there's, I don't know if there's any other testifiers out there. I would, again, renew the motion that be passed and placed on general orders.
Okay, Senator Weber renews his motion that House File 2542 be recommended to pass and placed on general orders. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. File passes, House File 2542 passes, and will be placed on general orders. Thank you, Senator Weber.
I'm just gonna have questions. Amendments, but they're basically just talking about what we-
Senator Dietzig, are you? Okay. I'm sorry, Senator Dietzig, if you were asking a question, I couldn't quite hear it there.
Oh, no, sorry, I was, had to step off and grab a phone call, so,
Okay, okay.
yeah. Yep.
Well, now we'll move up to the top of the order with the emerging COVID-19 related agricultural issues update. David Preisler and Paul Fitzsimmons. If you would, either one of you can probably begin this.
Dave Preisler. I'm the CEO for the Minnesota Pork Producers Association. We're based in Mankato. I've been in front of the committee before. First of all, thank you for making time for me today. I know that all of you have heard the words unprecedented and so on before, and truly we're in that same spot as we look at pig farmers within Minnesota. Just to set this up a little bit on the situation, you know, we've been warning people, quite honestly, about this for several weeks now. That as we were concerned that if COVID were to start to roll through packing plants and their workers, that we would have consequences. And unfortunately, that's come to pass. So to give you an idea, and this would be nationally, as of today, 36% of all the pork packing capacity that is in the United States is offline. So the plants are either closed completely, like Worthington, the JBS plant in Worthington, and the Smithfield plant in Sioux Falls would be two examples of that. And then we've got a whole host of other plants that are also closed, and then other plants that are running at they may be 80% of capacity or 70%, some at half. So again, our capacity today is reduced by about 36%. With announcements that just came this morning, that capacity will be reduced some more. So as of tomorrow, 45% of all the capacity to process pigs in the country will not be operating. So what that means, and again, I'll bring it down from, first of all, a national standpoint and then down to Minnesota. What that means is that roughly there are 1 million pigs in this country just this week that do not have a home. And we've been gradually working into this. Last week was pretty severe, and now this week is even more severe, to where we have pigs that are on farmers' farms right now, and farmers have been trying to hold them back and done a whole bunch of different techniques to do that so they don't gain weight as fast. But we've got pigs that weigh 350 pounds plus. And also, just so you know, once a pig hits 350 pounds plus, the most all packing plants, even if they were open, can't take them anymore because they're too big to run through the plant's machinery. Okay. And so there gets to be limitations there. And so again, we just have this complete mismatch of the plant capacity and pigs that are available. And again, this has been working for a while, and we are backed up about a little over 2 million head that should have already been processed that are sitting on farms in this country that have not been processed yet, and they just keep gaining weight. So you've probably seen news articles and so on about putting pigs down and putting, whether it's on farm or some other method to put pigs down. And we're at that place. Okay. So last week there was a farm in Minnesota that put down 3,000 market ready pigs. That same farm is going to put down another 7,000 this week. Best we can tell, and I do not, first of all, want to portray this as a completely accurate number. Best we can tell is there's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 75 to 80,000 that may get put down this week, just in Minnesota. And that number will continue to grow. We are very hopeful that the plant, the JBS plant in Worthington, will be up as soon as Wednesday to slaughter pigs. They will not be processing them for food. The carcasses will then roll out of the plant after they are slaughtered, and we'll have to deal with the carcasses from a disposal standpoint. And some of that is being worked out right now. But even that, if we look at the scope of our problem, we're short in Minnesota about 120 to 150,000 spaces a week. And even if they really got going, I mean, that isn't going to make much of a dent in that, because and we'll see how that goes. And again, that's not supposed to start till Wednesday. So quite honestly, farmers are bleeding really hard financially. We're not only having losses that are occurring just on, even if they are successful enough to get their pig to market and get paid, that market is really poor right now. In essence, it costs roughly about $130 to raise a pig, and the marketplace today is going to pay you maybe around somewhere around $75 to $80 for that pig. And then we've got the group of farmers that don't plain have a place for their pig to go. And those are the ones that are even in worse shape. And because if the pig has to be put down on the farm, or if they can work with a packing plant to put the pig down and then deal with the carcass later, there's zero revenue that comes from that. So we have got literally tens of thousands of pigs, possibly on a per day basis, that we're going to have to look at putting down here in Minnesota. Our ask of the legislature, and I don't have this in a bill format, but first of all, I wanted to have you understand the severity of the problem. And we don't see a very easy way to dig back out of this, because even if all the plants open back up tomorrow, we're still nationally behind over 2 million head to try and work through. There's not a logical way to do that. And so that's why it's really hard on farmers right now to make this decision to actually just put animals down. But we don't have another choice. Some of them are getting out of market weight, like I talked about before. Others were just out of room on the farms. So you end up with an animal welfare issue from a crowding standpoint. And we just don't have another choice. Plus, there's other pigs that have already been born a month ago, for example, that need to move into those spaces that those market hogs are taking up today. So I'll get back to the ask. The state of Minnesota, and it's at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, does have an ag emergency response fund. We would ask, and I've already reached out to the commissioner, that money be released immediately to assist in depopulation and disposal of carcasses. The other ask would be that we look for, and this probably at this point should probably be more heavily weighted towards the depop and disposal piece, because this is something that's going to take several weeks, maybe even a few months, to try and work our way through, especially with the big unknown of knowing when these packing plants will come back and come back successfully with enough workers. So the first piece I throw out there, and I used, quite honestly, a guide for this as to what the state invested into avian influenza, which we believe was somewhere around 12 million. So our ask here would be 15 million. And again, it'd be prioritized for to assist with helping to have the state work with people on depopulation and disposal and pay some of those costs, whether it be landfilling or composting or rendering, and then also the transportation that comes into that. And I also like a consideration for helping to offset a very small part of the revenue that the farms that are literally getting nothing for these pigs because they have to kill them. And so we balance that piece in there too, on a per pig basis. There are some federal programs. One of them is through the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, that does have a very, very small amount of money, first of all, and then it's limited for a whole host of farms. I would see that it would be half our farms probably wouldn't even qualify for the program. And it's got a limited amount of money that they can spend per farm and a limited total amount. Quite honestly, while I appreciate their effort, in its present format, it's completely inadequate. And it can only address the disposal side and help with some of that. And it can't do anything on the depopulation side, the way it's presently written. We've implored USDA to step up and to provide not only leadership, but also money to help with this. I'd say that over the last few days that they are taking this much more seriously, and we're hopeful that some things can come through with that, but quite honestly, there's really been not much right now, especially from a financial standpoint. There was an announcement about a week and a half ago that Secretary Perdue announced, payments that we're going to start to all sorts of farms, whether it's a dairy farm, cattle farm, pork farm, and so on. Again, as we evaluate that and the hole that we've got dug financially right now, it is not even going to come remotely close. The limitations that are built into that are just not even going to come remotely close for farms. Okay. To give you an example, a very typical barn, okay, we had typical markets, the revenue from that barn, if we sold all the pigs that were in that barn, would be somewhere around $350,000 or so, a little stronger than that, hopefully. And the cap on the federal money is $125,000. Okay, so it doesn't even come close. Especially when we're looking at a farmer that's going to get zero if their pigs actually just plain had to be put down. So, we are continuing to work with on the federal side of things. We have asked also the administration to enact the Defense Production Act to really kind of federalize these meat plants, at least to bring workers back to, if they can't have enough healthy workers to process the pig in the meat, then at least to help us or assist us with actually putting the pigs down. So it's done in an orderly way. And we'll see where that goes. But we have asked the administration for that and have been engaged with our senators and our representatives from Minnesota and a whole host of other states to push and assist. I will say that I do think now that most people are getting to and they are understanding the depth and the gravity of what we're dealing with. I also understand the state itself. You're going to have your own budget issues to work through with this whole thing. And so that's why the real money, so to speak, assistance-wise, is at the federal level. We've got a bottleneck right now, and we don't have dollars coming from the federal level to deal with the very clear and present issue of putting down pigs that need to be put down. And I don't say that lightly. It is tearing our farmers, it's tearing the guts right out of them. This is not how they were wired to operate, both from a financial standpoint and also from a mental standpoint. And so that's why I'm asking for the dollars, if we could, to be able to jumpstart this, at least within Minnesota, and then hopefully some things get backfilled from the federal side, but I'm not holding my breath. And we're facing this issue right now, and that's why I'm making the ask from a standpoint of release the dollars that are in the account right now to help out with it. And then the second piece would be an ask for 15 million to try and help deal with the depopulation and disposal and some of the farms that are going to get zero revenue whatsoever. With that, I've talked quite a long time. I thank you for your indulgence in listening to me. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Preisler. Appreciate the comments and the clarity around what's going on. We do have a question from Senator Frentz, and then we'll get over to Paul right after that, but we're going to tighten things up a little bit. We're running a little bit short on time. So Senator Frantz, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Preisler. I obviously am hearing from pork producers all across our area and across southern Minnesota. Do you mind saying a little more about getting these places back open? We had a talk with Congressman Hagedorn this morning. Obviously, that's a private business. I've talked to Paul. The government doesn't normally go in and order businesses to open like that. What are your thoughts? And in particular, JBS was talking about 2 weeks. Is that realistic? I mean, is it something where you tell Minnesota pork members, hey, you can count on that? Or are we talking about something that might be longer? And what does that mean for our producers? And for the record, you have a yes vote from me on any of the money that we can put together to help all livestock producers right now. This is as much a crisis as we've heard about in the 4 years I've been in the Senate.
Sure. So as we look at, what a defense production act would do, what we'd really be asking for is that if the packing plant has enough healthy employees, and I get it, we do not want people that are sick coming to work. We don't want to, that is not what we're asking for at all. So if you had enough healthy employees, let's let the plants run and work with the Department of Health. Quite honestly, any of the interactions that we've had with our state Department of Health here have been very useful and have been good, okay? But let them run, okay, and get them to run. And then there may be plants that are shut down. We've got a number of them, JBS, Smithfield, there's one in Iowa, there's gonna be another one in Iowa tomorrow, a group in North Carolina, to at least open them up on a limited basis to just kill the pig, okay? Unfortunately, we're gonna have to waste that meat, but we're in a spot, we're not gonna be able to get to it anyway, because we are so far behind, we're not gonna have a choice. So there is going to be waste that's going to occur here, because then at least we're killing that pig in a way that's, that's responsible and humane, and in a place that's used to doing it. Okay. And then we can deal with the actual, carcass itself, because the numbers we're talking about here are overwhelming. If you start looking at the volume of, let's say in Minnesota, and I don't have a guarantee in these numbers, but quite honestly, as we've been describing this to policymakers, the actual numbers are getting worse. They're not getting better. We're talking hundreds of thousands of animals in Minnesota over the next few weeks. So that's the ask. I mean, and I get it. It's tough for the federal government to come in and do that. The other thing is that, as the state works through this, we just need some flexibility.
Senator Frantz.
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for that, Dave. Is there anything the state can do to streamline the reopening? For example, can we combine the Department of Agriculture and Department of Health? Is there something that we can do at the state level? This is a state of emergency to speed up the regulatory process. Is any of that helpful to pork producers? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I make a comment here? This is Paul Fitzsimmons, and I'm a pork producer, but I'm not representing the Minnesota pork producers in there. So I'm representing clients in 4 or 5 different states, with the vast majority of them in Minnesota.
Go ahead.
And what we need is clarity. And when anytime, and we've been through livestock pandemics before, and I think Dave mentioned it, but historically we have never ever, as an industry, had to put healthy pigs down for any reason whatsoever. It's never been done. So this is historic. And I said this morning that what we've done is we have accelerated what may have taken 25 to 30 years into 3 months in the changing of what the landscape of the hog industry is going to look like when we come out of this. But the one thing that, whether it's Worthington and Formel would go down tomorrow, we don't know, is that it's clarity. And in our industry, in 2013, we went through PEDV. When we got through the first one, it was very clear how we were going to handle the ones going forward. But those plants need to understand that coming from the state, there's already a clear written plan on how to get them back up and running. As producers, we can take a look at and say, hey, we're going to be all right if we can plan out 2 weeks, but The one in Smithfield and Sioux Falls is going to be down 3. You're saying that the one in Worthington is going to be 2. It'll end up being 3. Ramp up takes another month. So, and Dave is at 36%, maybe 50% by the end of the week. By the end of this week, we will have 2.5 million pigs in the USA that got to get out of the way. And
Mr.
the number will
Fitzsimmons.
exponentially go up. So,
Mr. Fitzsimmons, want to touch back with Senator Francis' question then. Is there anything that you see that we could be doing at the state level then to be streamlining this or helping out the pork industry, which would probably fit into the other industries too?
I do have one that would help, and that would be have one clear messenger that's going to deal with the plants. Okay. And so in our suggestion, if you're going to work through this is a human disease, have the Department of Health work through that. So you have one clear messenger instead of multiples. Okay. That would be number one. And then also to understand that plants are going to do the absolute best that they can, but it may not be perfect. And so again, we're going to do the best that they can, and those plants are, but to expect perfection is not going to be something that is probably going to be possible. And again, we would like one messenger.
Okay.
Otherwise, it becomes really confusing for these plants if they're trying to satisfy multiple agencies and trying to deal with this.
Okay, thank you. And then we got one question from Senator Drayan.
Chair, and thank you, testifiers. Senator Disick asked a great question, and the same one I had, and the account balance for that emerging issue account. And then what I've heard from farmers in my district, it would be really nice if the state had one lead agency that producers could report to and not multiple agencies. So if the commissioner could kind of give us an update on those two, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Commissioner, would you like to hop in here at this point?
Sure. Thank you, Senators. Again, my name is Tom Peterson, Commissioner of Agriculture. And just, jump in and just make a couple of comments. First, I can tell you in the emergency preparedness account, there's $577,000. Those accounts too, keep in mind, were put there and really in place to deal with foreign animal diseases, avian influenza, African swine fever that we've talked about a lot. We're prepared to use those dollars and we've been looking at how we can spend those dollars judiciously. Remember too that pork is the most pressing problem right now. Pork is all consuming. We also, as Senator Gazelka mentioned on the floor today, had to put down chickens. In central Minnesota, we have the plants down in Wilmer. We're losing capacity for tens of thousands of birds there as well per day. We have canning factories. We have other food companies now that are also in this position. So as we look at this, we are looking at what's the best way. The monies in those accounts can be used to reimburse local units of governments for things that they cannot be reimbursed for somewhere else. They can also be used for the department to purchase equipment as kind of the definition in that account. And so we're looking and want to work with Mr. Preisler and other groups to use the money that we have for the greatest impact. And so knowing that, knock on wood, we don't contract any other animal diseases at this time too. We're willing to do that, and those funds are available. Again, we want to just make sure we're using them as good as possible. On the message too about one clear agency working on that or coming directly from the governor's office, we hear that, we understand that, and are working to communicate that. And on the calls that we're doing with the plants, we're trying to speak. We're not trying. We are speaking now with one agency, and it, this is something that is new for all of us in this level and this magnitude, and learning every day from the disease in other states. It's just all encompassing. A couple other things I just wanted to mention. We're really working closely with our federal government partners, and we're learning every day, as Mr. Preisler said, what's available for our dollars at the USDA at the federal level. How are we going to, what do we need to pay for it? What do the individual producers need to pay for? Is just going on and on and on. But, you know, again, willing to work on that and glad to answer any questions that you have today. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And Senator Draheim, I see your hand is up. Is that a holdover from the last, or do you have a question?
Sorry. No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Westrom. I see you had a-
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Peterson. First of all, congratulations on a Senate vote today. Glad we were able to work that out and our relationship that's been so good. Commissioner Peterson, with the landfill or composting of the animals, what can be done to, and I guess any thought or comment to help make this possible, get rid of any red tape that doesn't need to be there as far as letting the animals get composted or buried as close to the barns or the place of the euthanization as possible. But also, what about reaching out to dog food companies? I think we've got one in Perham. I know we've got one in Perham up here in north central Minnesota. I think Mankato has one or more. And is there any capacity for them to help ramp up or have some holding for this, you know, this opportunity at least to go into other manufacturing like that, but keeping the cost down for the cost of a burial and being able to otherwise bury them as close or compost. I've heard some people could use it as compost and sell it. Just any thoughts or comments on that, so we can keep the cost down and maybe use the dead pigs for as much positive commerce as possible.
Thank you, Senator. And again, thank you, Senators, for your vote today for confirmation. I deeply appreciate that in this time. One other thing I didn't mention in my comments that we get a lot is, you know, can't the local locker plant take these pigs? You know, we get calls every day. People say, I'll take 200 pigs. You know, and we've been building that out for about a month. You know, we've been talking about meat processing before we even had COVID-19. And so we have been, first, I just want to address that. We've accelerated our capacity at our local locker plants. We have NERC up in the Iron Range that are going to take 1,000, 2,000 pigs a week. We have several bigger lockers that are going to be able to take pigs. We moved lockers up from USDA to, from custom to USDA. And we have staff people who are making those connections. Again, that's going to take a few pigs, but is nothing near what we have. And so those pigs, as you said, Mr. Chairman, are going to go into landfills. And we've been working again with the PCA for many weeks. We have calls this afternoon identifying those landfills that are available for producers. It's very expensive to landfill pigs, but we are looking at how that will work. And we have a lot of options there. Frankly, the question too is trucking them from the farms or from the plants to the landfills. And then our rendering capacity in Minnesota, as you said, that is going, their rendering companies are very busy. They are taking a lot of hogs off. But again, they're limited in the capacity they're going to take. And those go to those companies that you mentioned. And so we're working on all of that. And a very proactive approach. So appreciate those ideas. And we're trying to very engage with the Pollution Control Agency, our counties, our county environmental services. They have a lot of questions. We just scheduled a call with Senator Weber's county this afternoon to look at that as well. So all that is in place and moving. But again, this is going to have to be many buckets. As Mr. Preisler said, the magnitude of 75,000 hogs a week. You know, a few are going to go here, a few are going to go there. Some are going to get composted, some are going to get buried, and some are going to get rendered. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, just to follow up,
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Peterson, thank you for that, and thank you for your comments. Anything we can do to work with activating more kill capacity at the small or the local meat markets,
Oh, Senator Westrom, did we drop you? Well, Commissioner,
Yep.
okay, Senator Westrom, we lost you just for a moment there.
Okay, I'm getting a message, my bandwidth is low, so rural broadband, but I was getting this message last week at the Capitol too, so maybe isn't just a rural issue. But Commissioner Peterson, just quick comments, thoughts, but we can talk about this more. But is there a way to lift regulations or creatively come up with ways to have inspectors, maybe through Zoom, inspecting animals on the front end or the back end, and maybe they only have to see the animal before they butcher it or after they butcher it, and one person could theoretically be in a location where maybe they're looking at animals coming in from 10 different locker plants to stretch that, especially during this time. And then is there other ways to help them be able to cut through the red tape on being able to retail that meat? Those were some comments I've heard from farm groups and conference calls I've been on. I just some food for thought. We can talk more later, but any brief comments on that? That's a way to save these animals and get them into the food chain as much as possible.
So, you know, like I said, we already had a problem or capacity. One of the things that's been going on here too, in COVID-19, people are buying locally from Minnesota grown. So those people that use those small plants, they're selling 4 to 5 times what they would normally sell. And so they're already backed up. And so we are using ag refunds. We did 9 grants last week. We've been doing those virtual inspections for a month now. For those plants. And we have worked with any plant that wants to move from custom to USDA. We can turn them around within a week and get them up online. And so we have been working with that with all kinds of plants across the state. We're lucky to bring a new plant online today. And we have expedited all of that. And we have top priority for our agency. So, but just keep in mind, it's already stretched, and that other side of it with those local sales booming, people are ordering directly from farmers. That's a good thing too, but it just, you know, doesn't create a lot of options for the farmers that want to sell or want to get those marketed. But we're doing everything we can and squeezing every penny out of Agri to make that available.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the time here. We are set against a hard deadline of 5 o'clock, and I know the next bill is going to end up with a lot of discussion on it. So unless somebody else has another question, a pressing question for the Commissioner, I think we should move on to the bill at hand. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your time. Mr. Fitzsimmons and Purcell, thank you for coming. I appreciate that. With that, we're going to move to Senate File 4495, Senator Westrom, and we will pick up where we left off last week. Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, I'll try to talk at a speed that works good with Zoom. I've been told that sometimes if you shut your video off, it helps the bandwidth. So I'll try this now, but I'll shut my video if it gets to be an issue. I think it's on now.
It's on, Mr.
Chair.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move to take from the table Senate File 44. Let's see, 95, I think it is. Joel, can you confirm? 95. And Mr. Chair and members, as we left this last week, we had concluded the testimony, and we were just to a point of discussion. And maybe to make it most efficient, I've put together an amendment that would be an author's amendment, but based on discussion from last week and others, there are some areas of concern in this bill and the language. And so what we would do is delete those provisions to take out any ambiguities or issues of concern, or a question about constitutionality, about banning the late fees would also be part of the amendment. So with that, maybe Mr. Chair, I'd offer the, maybe I'd have Greg just quickly walk through the amendment for members, and I'd offer that for discussion. And then that might limit any other questions we have, because I know others had maybe raised some questions about that. And I think that might speed things along.
Okay,
So, Senator, this is Joel. For procedure purposes, Greg needs to send this amendment out. So it'd be the A9 amendment. And then I will be posting this publicly on our Senate website for folks to view as well.
Okay, so why don't we pause for a little bit, Joel, to get that out, or is it going? What's the best way to go?
Mr. Chair.
The amendment's been posted on the website, and Greg, have you sent an email to members?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Joel, yes.
Okay. And Greg, was just sent now as I moved the amendment, correct?
Mr. Chair, Senator Westrom, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
So members, we'll give you just a moment to get it, but Greg, Mr. Knopf, if you could walk through the amendment while people are getting it, then we can have some discussion or vote on it. But why don't we do that in the interest of time, and that way people have time to get it.
Mr. Chair and members, the amendment, the first three lines are delete the prohibition on late fees, as Senator Westrom mentioned. Line 1.5, that's the technical that Senator Dietzig brought up last week. And then section or line 1.6, that's a technical change, because you'll see we've the amendment deletes section 4, the foreclosure moratorium. So a number of things are deleted. There's also a technical on 1.8. At one time, there were going to be notices for landlords when they were going to, and an application. We don't need that anymore as part of the fraud provision. And then in the last lines on 1.10 through 1.13, what that's doing is moving, actually goes all the way through 1.14. What that does is it provides that instead of a clause 3 that wasn't tied to the 15% reduction, it adds it to clause 2. So clause 2 now will read basically during the extensions and any other peacetime emergency declared by the governor related to COVID. So that's a technical. You'll see the lines are deleted on 7 and 8 on page 6 of the bill, but they're being reinserted into that clause 2. So that's the amendment, Mr. Chair and members.
Senator Westrom, do you want to move the A9 amendment, and then we can discuss?
Mr. Chair, I would move the A9 amendment as in front of the members and subject to any discussion, or make sure that everybody has received it, that I'd move the amendment, A9.
All right. Thank you, Senator Westrom. Any comments or questions from members? See no hands or anything. Let us vote on that then. So all in favor of the A9 amendment, say yes.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. So Senator Westrom, to your bill as amended.
Mr. Chair, members, this bill we introduced last week, the amendment takes out the provisions that we had received some testimony on that were ambiguous or conflicting in parts, especially primarily largely dealing with the foreclosure aspect of this bill. That is not in here anymore now after the A9. The other thing that came to light was the banning of contractual late fees. If you recall, the attorney from the bar, Kevin, I forget his last name, we do have Section 11 of the Constitution that we don't want to be in conflict with. And so we've removed that language. But members, let's focus on what this would do. Working with MHFA, the House, Representative Hausman, for the most of the month of April, and even before, we've been working on language to address the needs of housing for both tenants and homeowners. This would offer a $30 million aid package targeted to those that are affected by COVID-19, either through the job loss, reduction in employment, or job loss altogether. So their family income isn't the same and isn't available like it was, or they've been affected, somebody in their family with the illness, and making it hard or making them unable to be able to pay all of their rent or any of their rent or their home mortgage or whatever their situation is temporarily because of COVID-19. So these dollars would be a big help to those persons, and working with the housing providers that are also trying to work with people affected by COVID-19 during this emergency. And the dollars then would be it would be a three-way relationship. The state would have some of this
Senator Westrom, can you hear me? Senator Westrom?
and then
Hey, Senator
the
Westrom.
homeowner. Yes.
Senator Westrom, we lost you there for a moment. Maybe if we try for a short time without the camera, see if the data flows a little better.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Westrom. Senator Westrom.
We'll try this again. So members, this would be a great assistance for those affected by COVID-19 through a job loss or an illness. The money would be paid directly to the vendor that's providing those services, and make sure that they get paid, whether it's a utility company that they've gotten behind on, rent, or a mortgage payment. And the parties involved, it can be a very strong three-way relationship, some assistance from the state during this emergency time, as well as making sure that those that are in this together to clean more often and doing other things to work through this emergency, as have we heard from many employees and business owners that have lost their income because their business has been shut down or their hours have been cut back. And so that 30 million would be very important for us to get out the door. And also it would give 90 days of an eviction moratorium.
Senator Westrom. Senator Westrom. Senator Westrom. So we're still having a little bit of difficulty. You're coming in and out maybe every 30 seconds or so.
Okay.
So maybe if we could, Mr. Knopf, could you run through just the highlights of the bill from a high level, just so we can get a little bit of a recap of it, as Tori's trying to work on his tech side of things?
Mr. Chair, and if Mr. Knopf doesn't want to be put in that spot, Senator Weber is a co-author. If he has a better internet connection right now, that would be another option. But Greg, Mr. Knopf or Ms. Senator Weber might be able to step in accordingly.
Yeah, either way.
I'm fine doing it, Mr. Chair, if you want me to run through the bill quickly.
That would be great if you could do that.
Section 1 of the bill imposes an eviction moratorium for 60 days after March 24th, 2020. That's when the governor's order took effect. And it basically is very similar to that based on the public health emergency that's going on. Section 2 allows the governor to extend for up to 30 days, but that would be the end of it. The legislature would have to come back and enact further allowance for going beyond the 30 days. That was the 90 days that Senator Westrom was talking about. Section 3 is the assistance fraud, and that basically says that if you're trying to claim money under what's now Section 4 after the amendment is adopted for the program to get payment, and you submit intentionally a false claim with intent to defraud, then that would be considered theft of public funds, and you may be sentenced accordingly. Section 4 is gone now after the amendment. Section 5, which will become Section 4, that's the $30 million that Senator Westrom was talking about. And that money gets distributed through the Family Homeless Prevention and Assistance Program. And it's for people up to 300% of the poverty rate to receive funding when they've had a 15% or greater reduction in their income due to the governor's order on COVID. And there's a report requirement and other things. I don't think I need to go into too much detail on that, but that's basically what the bill is now.
Thank you, Mr. Knopf. And Senator Westrom, if you would like to add something to it, that would be good. It was just cutting out about every 30 seconds or so. Okay. If Senator Westrom, you're on mute still. So if you're trying to say something, just let me know. Otherwise, any other questions or comments on the bill?
Well, Senator Johnson?
Senator Weber.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm back.
I think this is really a good bill. I mean, and quite frankly, this was a bill that we had agreement with, that Senator Westrom had agreement with Representative Hausman on late on April 6th, until she walked away from it, I'm sure at the governor's insistence. You know, the reality of this is right now is that there are people out there not wanting to pay their rent, even though they have the same income that they had previously. And we can't allow that to go on indefinitely. And at the same time, we recognize there's a need to get housing assistance money out there. And I think this is a good start. You know, if indeed there is a need for more, we can address that. Actually, we will be in session until May 18th. And quite frankly, if the governor has to call a special session for us to deal with some of these issues, so be it. You know, Senator Frentz, you made the comment the other day before we hung up that, well, you agreed with the governor's use of the emergency powers. Well, I guess I have to be on the opposite side of that particular point. The reality of it is he has the power to change rules. He does not have the power to change statutes. And that's, you know, we feel very strongly about that. By the way, you also made the comment that, you know, something to the effect of, you know, if it was an attorney's idea, why it had to be right. I just want to mention, if that's the case, there'd be no need for judges, juries, and trials at that point. But anyway, that's another debate some other day. No, Senator Johnson, I'm not going to get into a debate with the chair on that.
Senator Weber, I mean, I think we could have that debate right now. That's what this is for.
And put the toothpaste back in the tube, Senator Weber.
Yeah, let's not do that.
But in any event, I do think that this this bill is really the way we need to proceed.
All right. Thank you, Senator Weber. Senator Dietzig has a question.
I have just some questions and some comments. So the first one is, Senator Weber, I agree with you that there probably are people out there that just don't want to pay rent. I've said it many times before, there are good tenants and there are bad tenants, and there are good landlords and there are bad landlords. And I have a constituent right now who is being threatened with eviction, even though she should not be. And so she's also running into, you know, she doesn't know if she wants to stay in this place anymore, but she can't find anybody to move her during all of this. And so that's a, you know, it's a whole nother problem. And so, you know, I'm going to support this bill today because I think we need to do something. I was reading an article this morning, and the city of Orlando, Florida, opened up some rental assistance grants, and they have 20,000 applications. City of Minneapolis has they did a housing assistance program that opened up last Wednesday, and they had 7,500 applicants as of 8 a.m. this morning. And neither of those two funds was prepared for that many people applying. And so there clearly is a need and concern out there. So I'm supporting this bill with reservation just because I think we need to do something. I do have some, you know, questions I raised last time. The concern that the feds did a different timeline than this bill, and my just concern of questions coming up by both the landlords not knowing, you know, do they follow the state one, do they follow the federal one? And then, you know, again, you've got good tenants and bad tenants, and good landlords and bad landlords. And if you have people taking advantage of that situation, where they might not know which category they fall into or their landlord falls into. So I think that is just a concern I have going on. And then how do you enforce all of this is a whole nother question. This is another question that came to my attention that I'm not going to do anything with today, but I think we should look at. It's the termination of residential leases. And so there's also, if you switch to a month-to-month, it might not be considered a lease anymore, but a tenancy. And so I don't know if we need to adjust that right now, but I would ask the chair to let me look into that more. And then if we need to make that amendment later, just for clarifying sake, because I don't think we mean to be leaving out those people under section 1, paragraph 2. So we just want to deal with that. And then I also raised the issue last week on the JBS plant. And so just to clarify, do they fit under this? Because you could have people who do not have an illness, and there's no one at their home who has an illness or has a health issue that prevents them from being employed, and they also lost a reduction of their income or their job, but it wasn't necessarily due to the peacetime emergency declared by the governor, but by COVID itself. And so do we need to add that in? I have the A11 amendment, if we want to look at that, that just kind of puts in, so it would add after page 6, line 5, after unemployment, it would add as a direct result or direct or indirect result of COVID, so that, again, people who are at the JBS plant that don't have the disease, but the plant is shut down, are covered in this. And so I can offer that now and we can discuss it, or we can just, you know, look at it as we continue the discussions on the bill. So I'll leave that up to the chair and the author.
Senator Westrom, do you have some guidance on this? Senator Westrom, okay.
Mr. Chair?
There, I can hear you.
Mr. Chair. Yes, go ahead. I'm actually raising my bandwidth as we talk.
Oh.
So he's just about got that done at the phone company. So go ahead, repeat the question if you could, please.
So last week I brought up the discussion on page 6 you could have a situation where you have people like in the JBS plant where they do not have, they're not sick. There's no one at their house that is sick. The plant wasn't shut down due to the peacetime emergency, but they lost their job because the plant shut down due to COVID. And so do we need to add in something in section 2 on page 6 to specifically deal with them to make sure they are covered? I have an A11 amendment that might get to that. If you want me to offer it, I can, or we can just continue to keep working on it.
Definition, but unless Mr. Knopf reads something different than what we've had, I thought that's exactly some of the people we are targeting. If they've lost income because of job cutbacks or plant shutdowns. So I think it's covered, but if there's some belt and suspenders, we could look at that. Mr. Knopf, do you have any? I thought that's covered already.
Mr. Chair, Senator Westrom, I agree with Senator Dietzig that it's not necessarily covered because right now you either have to have a sickness from COVID or you have to be have your income reduced because of the governor's emergency order. It doesn't say anything about a plant being shut down because of COVID, and you haven't contracted COVID. So her A11 amendment would change that, so they would be eligible also. The big issue is going to be, are they within 300% of poverty? And especially if the plant's keeping the payroll going or they're on unemployment, they likely wouldn't qualify anyways, but I don't think it does any harm to adopt that amendment and broaden it.
Mr. Knopf, could you just read the amendment so it's available for everybody? Just so how it would fit in that section.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's on page 6, line 5, after unemployment, insert as a direct or indirect result of COVID-19. And then it goes on to say, or because of the governor's executive order. So it adds that to one of the criteria for being eligible.
Okay.
Again, they still would have to meet the 300%
the other threshold
poverty line.
Thank you, Mr. Knopf and Mr. Chair. I would see that as a friendly amendment. Senator Dietzig, anybody else want to comment on it, feel free.
Mr. Chair, I think I sent it out to all of you. I got it, but I want to make sure everybody got the amendment.
Says Mr. Knopf, with that amendment where it says directly or indirectly affected, what's the definition of indirect, an indirect result?
Well, Mr. Chair, it's going to be it's just trying to pick up anybody who's going to be affected by it, that they could apply for this program, and they've they still have to be within 300%. They still have to have at least a 15% reduction in income, and it's due to either directly or indirectly to COVID-19. I mean, that, if you're laid off from a plant and you don't have it, but you're kind of indirectly, basically, it's going to be, that's part of the implementation of it. It will be interpreted by the agency and by the people working with these families.
Yeah. To me, you could almost then leave off that factor test of direct or indirect result of COVID-19 and just say 300% of poverty and a reduction of 15% income, because direct or indirect pretty much opens up the gate to anybody, unless there's a reasonableness test involved with that indirect aspect.
Well, Mr. Chair, you also could just remove the words direct or indirect, just say as a result of COVID-19. I mean, that's kind of the idea that Senator Dietzig's been trying to get at.
Oh. Senator Westrom, Any guidance on this?
Mr. Chair, repeat the question or the situation. I heard Senator, was it Draheim that had a question? I'm off with my tech support now, so I've got more bandwidth. I'm going to see if that improves my situation. Does it seem to come through any better, Mr. Chair?
You could try putting it on your picture. You're still just a name on the screen right now, but you could try putting that on. We'll test it.
Okay. Let me know how this goes, because he just upped my speed. So.
Oh, they must upgraded graphics too. You look much better.
Very good. Repeat with a question, Senator Draheim.
Well, I just asked Mr. Knopf on that amendment, on the A11 amendment, where we have both direct and indirect result of COVID-19. Seems like we're really opening up the gate to basically anybody.
Sure.
But Senator Knopf, or Mr. Knopf said, well, what if we just eliminate direct and indirect and just said as a result of COVID-19 on that amendment?
Oh, I see. And Mr. Chair, I think you do raise a good point. I think, and Senator Dietzig, if I could just ask you, I mean, I think your intention is we want it to cover those affected by COVID-19, but would you be open to taking direct and indirect off and just clarifying that issue as a result of COVID-19 is
yes,
what we're
thank you.
trying to cover.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Westrom and Mr. Chair. It's just and as I'm going back and read it, if it is a reduction, I think that being in that same section 2, it's a reduction of income, and then you've got the or a loss of income or a loss of a job due to the governor's declaration. So the or might be enough that, you know, if they have a reduction of income by 15%, or they lose their job because of the governor's order, I think they're covered. I just want to make sure that because I think you do have people who are not sick with COVID, or family members and household members sick with COVID. But again, they didn't lose their job due to the peacetime emergency. It was, you know, the plant situation is a perfect example where it was lost to, they had to shut the plant down because of the number of people with COVID, but they themselves weren't sick. So I just want to make sure on the record that we have that they're covered. So if we, you know, it can either, I mean, I think as I'm rereading this, it might actually be okay as long as we've clarified it on the record, in case anybody has to go back and read this, that it's somebody who has lost a reduction in their income by 15%, you know, or they've lost their job due to the peacetime emergency. I think that covers people. But, you know, if we want to clear it in, put it in there.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a good way to do the amendment by removing the direct and indirect, if Senator Dietzig's okay with that. And for the record, Senator Dietzig, when we were first working on this language, I think that one of the big groups of affected parties were the waiters and waitresses, as it wasn't,
right.
It was pretty recent and when all the bars and restaurants had been closed down. But you've got beauticians and others that would fall into that same category where no fault of their own, they haven't been subject to the illness, but their business or place of employment was ordered to shut down and it affected. Now, many people are going to be covered because they've already been receiving unemployment insurance plus $600 a week of extra pay. So it may not be a situation that some of those persons that were laid off by no fault of their own maybe already have income covered. But if they don't, the intention is that those affected by those business shutdowns, whether there's COVID in their business or not, it's related to COVID-19. So I think your amendment would be good if we just take the direct and indirect out, but that is the intention.
That works for me.
So Mr. Knopf, if you wouldn't mind making an oral amendment to that, and then we could just vote on that, Mr. Chair. I think that'd be good to add to the bill as amended.
Well, Mr.
I'll make
Chair,
the oral amendment.
Mr. Chair, Senator Westrom, I think Senator Dietzick could just incorporate that change into her amendment. So it'll be the A11 amendment minus the words direct and or indirect.
So moved.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say yay.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Motion passes
As amended.
as amended. Let's see. So Senator Draheim, you had your hand up here about 15 minutes ago. Do you still have a question?
Oh, I was just wondering if anybody from the agency had any data or were working on any data on the question I raised at our last meeting on the number of people that would be affected and what the monthly cost would be if we did some housing programs. You know, we have almost 600,000 people unemployed. I think the numbers will be this week, and they're applying for unemployment. They're getting 60% of their wages plus the $600 a week. For most people, that's more income than what they were making, and they shouldn't need rental assistance. But I was just wondering if there was any more discussion from the department standpoint on that issue.
Do we have anybody from the department?
Senator Johnson, Chair Johnson.
Oh, okay.
Hey, it's yeah, Senator Johnson and Senator Draheim. It's Ryan Baumtrog, the Assistant Commissioner for Policy at Minnesota Housing. I'd be happy to follow up with Senator Draheim on some numbers that we've been working around as it relates to, you know, who was housing unstable headed into this, and what do we think some estimates could be. I think to reiterate what the commissioner said last time, I think what we're trying to figure out is when this will end, and not knowing the endpoint and the impact is then really hard to determine what the quote right number is. And so to that point, I did want to follow up Senator Draheim as you talk about, you know, unemployment insurance and the extra 600. You know, this program runs on an individual case basis. And so if an individual or a family were to go apply for benefits and they can't prove that they've lost income and that they have a housing crisis, they will not be eligible. I think what I'd say then is what happens to that family after the $600 per month federal enhancement for stimulus ends in July. We want to be sure that maybe then in August that they would need some assistance. And so I think a lot of the the rationing of the resources will go by our grantees on a case-by-case basis as they determine eligibility for the program.
Follow up, Chair.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments. And I guess that's kind of my point is, you know, what is the math moving forward by the month, so we can kind of figure that out. So if you would share that, that would be great. So by my calculations, if we have, I think the numbers bounce between 2.2 and 2.4 million households in Minnesota, and if about a quarter of them are collecting that unemployment, you know, where does the other 3/4 land, I guess. So I'll take that offline, and I appreciate your time.
So we are back on the bill as amended. Any more discussion regarding the bill and the amendments? Seeing none, Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, I would renew my motion, but members, I think we've had good discussion on this and the need for this and the need to move this along to bring some certainty and some relief to those that might need it. And as
Maybe we didn't jack up the bandwidth enough. One more.
needing that, maybe some federal support drops off as the months go on. This can be used then as well. So, Mr. Chair, I'd renew my motion to pass this bill as amended and re-refer it to, I believe it's the Finance Committee.
All right, you said it right. This will be referred to the Senate Finance Committee. All those in favor, aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Motion passes, and this will be sent on to the Senate Finance Committee. Thank you, Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And
well, with that, go ahead, Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, members of Joel or Mr. Chair, jump in if I'm not remembering something, but this does conclude our committee agenda for today. We do have some ag bills coming up, one being Senator Dame's farm advocates bill, along with working on our omnibus finance bill. We've been in discussions with the House on it might be Thursday instead of Wednesday. We're trying to find times. We're a little constricted because there's a little bit of a problem if more than two committees try to meet at one time slot. So Wednesday, we're trying to juggle some things, but stay tuned. It'll be Wednesday. If it's not Wednesday, it'll be Thursday to deal with those ag issues and some that we just heard about last week and earlier in this meeting. There's a lot that are able to be, of course.
Senator Westrom.
Look forward to those discussions.
Senator Westrom, sorry to butt in here, but you're still breaking up a little bit, so you better call back to your telephone company and have them bump it up one more time. But we caught maybe half of what you just said there in the last minute.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, stay tuned for the Ag Committee later this week, Wednesday or Thursday.
All right. Thank you, Senator. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.